Do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? This question has been the topic of passionate disagreement and debate for a very long time. Now, I'm going to say that the question is just not a good question. At least not how it's worded, because there's a clear sense in which the answer is yes, and there is a clear sense in which the answer is no. If the question were to be simply clarified, virtually all of us would agree on this issue. Now, this is a debate that's been going on for a very long time, but it became something of a thing, at least more of a thing, about 10 years ago when a professor from Wheaton College, Larissa Hawkins, I think I'm saying her name right, wrote a post on social media saying that she stands in religious solidarity with Muslims. She announced her plan to wear a hijab, teaching her classes at Wheaton, at church, and other places. And the reason she gave for doing this was because we, as Christians and Muslims, worship the same God. Wheaton put her on administrative leave, and after lots of reactions on both sides, both Wheaton and Dr. Hawkins agreed to part ways. There was a lot going on there since it involved questions of academic freedom and those sorts of things. This is especially the case because she was a tenured professor at Wheaton. But the issue has continued to pop up. In fact, it's popped up again here recently. I've seen a lot of headlines from YouTube channels or various other places where people are asking yet again whether Christians and Muslims, and sometimes Jews, right? Sometimes Jews are included in the question, whether or not we all worship the same God. Now, here's the crazy thing. I actually think we agree. I think we would agree if the question were to be clarified. I think this is just an ambiguous question, and people feel so very passionate and it gets very heated. But if the question were to be simply clarified, virtually all of us would agree on this issue. And so that's the point of this video, is to give two, what I see as sort of the two basic ways in which this question can be interpreted. And I think for the most part, sort of uncontroversially, we will agree, Christians at least will agree with the answers to these questions. All right, the first way to take this question is as asking, do Christians and Muslims worship the same God, where God as a concept is being understood in roughly the same way? Now, understood this way, most people will say no, for the very, very obvious reason that the fundamental concepts involved in the Christian conception of God and the Muslim conception of God differ, and they differ in their essential properties. The Christian God is Trinitarian. And the Muslim God, Allah, is strict unity, right? It's Unitarian. In fact, on the Muslim understanding, it's a very grave sin to divide God up or to kind of give partners to God or associations to God. So they understand God as a strict unity. How you approach God is different. How you serve God is different. How you are saved on the different views, right, is different. Even the way in which you worship God on the Christian view versus the Muslim view is not the same. This is really just to say these are truly different religions, and I think everyone knows this, right? There's definitely some overlap, sort of a kind of conceptual overlap, but these notions of God are fundamentally different. They are fundamentally different, and in this way they are incompatible. God can't both be a Trinity and a strict unity. Now, there might be some religious pluralists out there who would say that Christians and Muslims are talking about and worshiping the same being now, but probably for kind of different reasons, right? Some of them just ignore the conceptual differences and say it's sort of close enough, and they're all sort of like two different roads that lead to the same place. But there is a more sophisticated version of religious pluralism defended by someone like John Hick, who says that these conceptions are very different, sort of fundamentally different, But it's not that one is right and the other is wrong. It's that it's a failure of language, right? They kind of both do their best to describe a reality that can't be described by language, what Hick would call the real with a capital R. And so kind of the best we can do is muddle our way through with these strictly speaking false statements or statements that fail to kind of really do the job at describing, and in that it helps us progress towards the real. So for the religious pluralist, the Christian conception and the Islamic conception, again, both fundamentally different and both, in a sense, failing to describe, but they both provide a way to approach the same reality. Now, I think that there are some serious problems with the religious pluralist view, one of which is how does the religious pluralist know that we are progressing towards the real? Wouldn't that fail to describe in some way or other? But anyway, most people aren't going to take the religious pluralist view. Most people in this discussion are just going to say, no, of course, the Christian and the Muslim are not, don't have roughly the same conception of God, and in that sense, they don't worship the same God. But not everyone in the discussion will understand the question this way. The second way to understand or take the question is as asking, are Muslims and Christians referring to the same God in their worship or in their perhaps religious practice? Now, I think those who are more inclined towards philosophy will sort of hear the question this way. And for many of the philosophical types, the answer will be clearly yes. Muslims and Christians are referring to the same God in their respective worship and respective religious practice. At least on certain widely held theories of reference. So let me just give you an idea of how this goes. You can refer to someone pretty easily. You can refer to someone without knowing a lot about that person. And you can even refer to someone with factually incorrect data. So let me give a very common example when people are talking about theories of reference. Let's think about Clark Kent. So imagine one person says that Clark is kind of a nerdy guy, an awkward guy. He's a reporter for the Daily Planet. I think he's from Kansas. I could be wrong about that, but I think Kansas. And another person says, no, Clark has superpowers. He can actually fly through the sky and has super strength, and he's from the planet Krypton. Now, the point of this is to say that despite the disagreement, these both refer to the same guy. Right? The reference, you're still picking out the same guy, Clark Kent, or also Superman, right? Now, the problem of this example is that these traits or these attributes are all somewhat compatible, right? They all are true of Clark Kent / Superman. But we can add a third claim. Imagine a third person who says Clark is a nerdy, awkward guy who's a reporter for the Daily Planet, but at night, he puts on a bat suit, drives the Batmobile, and fights crime, right? Now, those are false statements about Clark Kent, let's assume. But we're still referring to Clark Kent. We just have some of the details that are wrong. So to relate this to the question of the Christian and the Muslim, insofar as Muslims believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing, transcendent creator of the universe who revealed himself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? I think all of those things would be universally believed by Muslims. We do have overlap in the Christian conception and the Muslim conception. But on the Muslim conception, again, Allah is non-Trinitarian. They deny the incarnation. And some will argue that on the Islamic conception, right, God isn't necessarily or unconditionally loving. He doesn't love the sinner. It's only those who follow the dictates of the Quran and those sorts of things. So the idea here is that there's lots of significant disagreements, just like you could have lots of significant disagreements about who Clark Kent is, but we're still all referring to the same being. The Muslim and the Christian are still referring to the same being, just in terms of reference. So if that's all we're talking about, if we're just asking whether or not Muslims and Christians refer to the same God in their worship, then again, on these theories of reference, the answer would be yeah. Now, that's fairly uncontroversial in philosophical discussions, that again, given certain theories of reference, that both Christians and Muslims are both referring to the same God, even though they understand God very, very differently and they worship God very differently and so on. Now, is this an important question? Should we spend our time asking this question? I actually think there are really important philosophical and theological issues here. I mean, obviously, it's really important to understand the differences between the Christian conception of God and the Islamic conception of God and other conceptions of God and so on. And I think these theories of reference are actually really important, really interesting to understand what it means to refer to someone even when you disagree about who that person is. But put philosophical types together with some theological types, and it will be a conversation with fireworks, and I think will be largely unproductive, right? Why? Because they're going to talk past each other. But if we can clarify the question, then I think we can have a very productive conversation. So you might like the fireworks, and there's going to be a lot of people who click on those videos to see the fireworks. But at the end of the day, I say we aim at being productive.